So, David, welcome to the Beyond the Game podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a big honour to chat about, all the stuff that I get up to and mindset and adventures and the weeks to come and beyond. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a long one in the making, but glad to get you on here. So, for all of the podcasts, we start with the first question, and that is around the power of sport. So, what does the power of sport mean to you?
Well, I think there's probably quite a lot of strands to that question, but I've come from an elite sport background. I used to play table tennis professionally. I certainly see that inspiration and empowering, especially youngsters and myself having a disability and growing up with my struggles. But if I had a me to look up to and have as a role model, then maybe I wouldn't have struggled so much. But I do think struggles are a good thing. They definitely make you stronger, and I wouldn't be the athlete I am today if I hadn't gone through that. So this all kind of bundles up in and around the platform of sport. It gives a purpose, it gives something to aim for, goals, targets, dreams. Without those, I think life can get very difficult. Again, especially relating with disability and pain management and things that you can't do. I, for one, would have found the tough times a lot harder if it wasn't for sport. It's unbelievably powerful in that sense. So yeah, there's multiple facets to it.
I know it feels like such a big question to ask at the start of a podcast, but I think it's always really insightful just to actually let someone monologue about sport and see what it is that truly resonates with them.
It's made me incredibly fitness minded and everything that comes with that. Since my table tennis career, I've found that I needed to translate that into another passion, which has become running marathons and endurance events and triathlons. And I do think those come hand in hand in a way in terms of bettering yourself. Yeah, it's definitely saved me from some dark times. I think I would say the hardest part of my career was the career transition after, because I lived my dream, right? I did everything that I could ever have wished for. I just never really had a plan for what came afterwards. So
before we dive into your athletic career, where you find yourself now, the challenges that you're building up to, could you just give us a little bit of context about some of the medical conditions that you have and the reality of those as well?
Yeah, I think it can be an elephant in the room sometimes. People are scared to say, oh, why have you got a wonky leg? Or why is your left leg considerably shorter than my right leg?
I saw you describe it in your TED talk, and you said this is my favorite because it's got a little bit of character to it.
It makes me me. It's unique. Loads of people have limb differences. No one else has got a leg like me in the world, and no one else is the same as you. No matter whether you're able-bodied, everyone's unique, and I think having a disability makes you especially unique. It's like Goggins says, opportunity to be uncommon, even amongst the uncommon. Anyway, it's given me an incredible platform to build a career and achieve my dreams. And I wouldn't be speaking to you now if it wasn't for my disability. So it's shaped my whole character. Again, that comes back to the power of sport and the power of disability as well. It's a massive plus in my life. And obviously I never used to see it like that. But yeah, reversing back, I was born with a bone condition called multiple epiphyseal dysplasia, which actually wasn't diagnosed until I was about 5 years old, because it's very rare. It's about 1 in 10,000 births, I think, which are affected by bone dysplasia, which basically means that the growing ends are misshapen. So the process of ossification and bone growth is defected in my condition. So all my joints are misshapen. And that's why I'm quite short as well. So initially, the doctors thought I had achondroplasia. I had dwarfism, but as I got older, it became apparent that it was something else. Yeah, it took a while to diagnose. And as I got older, just presented itself in limited range of motion, lots of joint pain. I remember trying to almost keep up with my older brother. He's a year older than me, so we were quite competitive growing up. But there was no other, I don't know, I was used to get tired, I used to get fatigued, and it was frustrating. But obviously having a reason, having a diagnosis helped my acceptance quite considerably. Aside from that, I was born with a hole in my heart. So I've got a condition called tetralogy of Fallot. So I've got 4 different things defected in my heart, which was the immediate concern. So my bone condition was almost like not really a critical thing to worry about when I was a baby. So that got repaired when I was 11 months old. So I've got a heart pacemaker. Maybe I can get it out. Maybe, can we see that? I've got a pacemaker there.
It's about.
So as my body fat, as my body fat's dropped for the marathon training, it's become quite more and more prominent. That's in a way, I'm very mindful of that in terms of health and well-being and fitness and nutrition. My pacemaker has leads going into my heart, 2 of them go down the same veins. That has definitely shaped my mindfulness over staying fit and healthy, sport, and all that entails. And that's quite a lot to go through as a kid. And I just, yeah, I think, again, I've alluded to the fact that it was a bit of a struggle. I just wanted to be like my brother when I was younger. That was an unattainable task. It was difficult mentally, not only physically with all the pain. I basically have really, really, really bad arthritis times a million. That's probably the easiest way of describing my disability. So it is, yeah, bone on bone grinding. Ball and socket joints are more like rugby balls, and my hip's not actually in its socket at the moment. But yeah, it's incredibly painful. And running a marathon and trying to break the Crutch Marathon World Record and trying to do an Ironman is definitely not advisable by my doctors. And there's, I always think there's a bit of a grey area with pushing yourself. But my response has always been that I'm in the same amount of pain whether I'm lying in bed or whether I'm running a marathon. It's given me a purpose and a reason to push through that pain, but it easily sums up why I'm so obsessed with doing so, where I'm at in my life right now.
That's such good insight. I think one thing that actually reminds me of is the Stockdale paradox. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's essentially about accepting the brutal facts of reality and life, but having this unwavering faith that knows that however hard things are, in the end, you will conquer them. And that to me sounds very similar to your mentality.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I've said to you previously about the brain being an ever unsaturated sponge and you can never know too much. So I try to live my life by quite a lot of Stoic principles, and it's very much about virtue and doing the right thing, but also not necessarily a lack of emotions, but just being able to deal with them. And I do think leaning into that pain and that suffering is always the way forward. Because if you try and block these things out, you just can't. And the more you try and block them out, the more intense these feelings feel. And they just spiral, the same as nerves and the same as anything. Like, just try and almost, I don't know, be a bit, you can kid yourself and pretend they're not there, but, they absolutely are there. The pain is there if you lean into it. And that's the way of dealing with it in the end, I think. So yeah, I guess it does link. What did you call it? The Stockdale paradox.
Stockdale paradox. So one thing you touched on there as well was the fact that your relationship with your conditions and your identity has changed over time. Obviously, growing up, it was a somewhat different experience to some of your peers and especially your brother. How has your relationship between your conditions and your identity changed over time?
I think the big word you used was acceptance. I think you have to fully, wholly accept the situation that you are in. This can happen to anyone can have an injury. I think if you're an athlete and you've gone through your career without an injury, then you're lying. So change is a part of life. Right? Accepting that change is the first step to dealing with it. Well, I'd say the first step is actually recognizing the situation, because sometimes you have all these thoughts in your brain. You're not consciously tapped into every single one of them. So if you recognize, your true thoughts and the true situation that you're in, then you can accept it, and then you can deal with it. I think that there would be my 3 stages. And really, when I was growing up, I didn't even think I had a disability. I was completely oblivious to it, almost pretended that I was able-bodied, and I tried to do it. There are certain things that I could not do, and I just never accepted that, which you could say is a good thing, because it made me strive to be the best I could possibly be, to maybe try and reach something which was unattainable. And I reached a level which it's still extremely good. Maybe that is a good thing growing up. But I do think when you take it back to other things like self-consciousness, that's a big thing around disability. Being a little bit self-conscious. Like, obviously I've got a big limb difference now. I broke my leg when I was 10, which made it a lot worse, and that's why it's kind of a bit wonky. That's why it stunted the growth. That was a big moment in my life for my acceptance, because it gave a very real, physical, obvious thing that I had a disability, and it was maybe a little bit more invisible prior to that, which can be difficult, right? Because it almost qualified things for me. Like, if I'm in a running race and I look normal, and yet I'm 10 seconds slower than my brother for no apparent reason, even though I'm stronger and should be faster. There's no shoulds in life, but I do like to think that there's massive coulds. It was tough for me, but then having almost a qualification, a diagnosis, a obvious visible disability, I learnt to accept it a little bit more. And, things like, even as you get a bit older through adolescence and puberty and stuff, and like, you do worry about what you look like. And I think you can take that in the sporting realm as well, where you're playing a big match or you're running a big race in front of thousands of people and it's on TV and you worry what people are thinking. And this is all noise, and it's not helpful for your performance, is it? So I think it's so relatable to quite a lot of things in life. And fundamentally, I learned that if it's an issue for you, or if you've got an insecurity, then it will be for other people as well. Whereas if you wholly, fully accept who you are, and it's not an issue for you, and you absolutely own it, embrace it even, to the point where it is your superpower, then other people will see that in that positive light, and it won't be an issue for them either. I learned that quite soon after my football injury. And then obviously that has only intensified as I got older. And especially things like dating and things like that, height, you could take this into any context, I think. Society says the guy should be taller than the girl. Like, obviously my bone condition makes me quite short, and I've learned to just own that, not necessarily in a egotistical way to put myself out there to be someone who I'm not, but just, like I said, coming back to, if you completely accept who you are, then other people will completely accept who you are too. I think that's the key to it.
Yeah, no, I think that acceptance is a very powerful thing, whether that's accepting yourself, accepting your differences, accepting your vulnerabilities. If you look at your journey, would you say that also creating purpose has helped you to accept your disability as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We can then fast forward the unbelievable platform that I had through the Paralympics. I still had all these insecurities, should we say, anchoring yourself to that purpose of why you're there, i.e. inspiring people, or promoting disability awareness. These are just two that I was a little bit more in touch with as I got older. It definitely helped my performance levels in terms of letting go of the outcome, because sometimes you can try as hard as you want, but sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It can be a bit of an emotional roller coaster, I do think. Whereas if you just go out and do your best for a particular reason, purpose, then you can't possibly fail, can you? Because you can always do that. That should be a given. And I found as I got older that was more conducive to actually winning anyway, because it would just depressurize the situation a little bit for me. You can't win everything, can you? You can't go and run your fastest race every single time for no apparent reason. Sometimes you need a bit of luck. If you go out there and anchor yourself to that purpose of why you're actually there, when you hit a bit of a wall, when you hit a bit of a struggle, or when you hit something that is outside of your control, your opponent might have a particularly brilliant day for them. There's nothing you can do about that. Sometimes you can only respond how you want to respond. And that's the same with struggles and challenges. It's your response which really defines you. So it definitely helped me.
Just based on what you've just said there as well, goals are great, but the process of how you achieve them and falling in love with that, I think is sometimes almost just as important.
Everyone's different, right? Wherever you find your strength and your motivation from is absolutely valid. And if you know that makes you tick, and that's going to get you up in the morning, then you should go all in on it. It's a very, especially, sports psychology, performance psychology is a very individual thing. For me, I like to be, stillness is the key, stoic mind, very calm, clarity of thinking, because it's a very underrated skill to see something for what it truly is. Stick the emotional brain to the back, and at the forefront, stay logical and stay kind of very process driven, and hopefully everything else will go with it.
So if we lean into that, in London going to be attempting to break the Crutch Marathon World Record, what does the preparation look like? How do you prepare yourself with that kind of mindset to go into that event?
I think it helps to think that the hard work's already done, right? Once I line up at the start line, it should just take care of itself. Again, there's no shoulds in life. I feel that I've done the work, left no stone unturned. Therefore, I've given myself the right to be supremely confident in my ability to reach my goal, right? However, there are things that are outside your control. Injuries. I think my main goal for the next 3 weeks is to not get injured. Nothing silly. Realizing that, the odd bad session here and there at this stage won't make too much difference. It's just refining the process. I'm slightly concerned that my crutches might not hold out. Ergonomically, I've adapted to them, and a new pair now would feel different, and I've not necessarily worn them in. So at this stage, not a fitness event for me. It's not an endurance, it's a strength of mind event for sure, but the fitness, I'm confident, is there. That gives me a little bit of a boost, and it's just a question of whether my body can hold out. And it's a bit uncharted territory to the back end of that marathon, because I've only ever done it once before. It's a lot of unknowns, and that's what makes it all the more exciting. Actually, on the start line, nerves that are created from the noise, it's hard for me to articulate now how I will be feeling, because it's everything that I've trained for arguably my whole life. You can't just rock up and do a crutch marathon. I've been on crutches since I was 10 now, so, and all the mental kind of resilience that comes with that, the whole journey that's built towards being able to even attempt it, because it's a dream for me. I couldn't walk like a couple of years ago after my first hip replacement, so it's been a big driver for me to even attempt to do one. So it's going to be fantastic. Another key for me, you have an unbelievable power over your emotions, because you have a power over how you view perspective. And if there's a dial that you can slide up and down, or the lens of how you view yourself is how I do that. I.e., at one end, it's, I think, this is completely irrelevant to life right now. All I'm doing is running a marathon. No one actually cares about this in the whole cosmos, the whole universe. There was a speck on this kind of universe. And then the other end of that dial would be, this is everything that I've trained for. Pressure, nerves. This is the most important thing to me right now. Depending on whether you want to kind of ramp things up a little bit or just depressurize yourself a little bit, you can switch how you view the particular situation you're in that perspective scale, and therefore control your emotions a little bit. That's how I do it anyway, really quick and easy, just to check in with myself. I might have to do that on the start line or even mid-race, because it can certainly diminish the feeling of things like pain, for sure. And more often than not, you'll find that pain is absolutely endurable, and you just got to endure it. Yeah, the cure for pain is in the pain. All these quotes, all these kind of Stoic principles, they are definitely at the forefront of my mind. And at the end of the day, we're just overcomplicating things. All I've got to do is run towards a finish line. I do think that sometimes you can worry too much, you can think about things too much, and it can stress you out. That's one thing I would say to people as well, like in terms of advice to the youngsters and the table tennis kids in the hall that I'm coaching, and people who want to get into running. Just don't even think about it. Just do it. Just get out there and see for yourself, because I'm positive that everyone can have these, almost when you get the endorphins flowing, you get spaces in your brain which are unlocked, and you have epiphanies that come out of nowhere. And that happens for me, for sure. That will happen for me in London. So if only I had a bit of a scribe who could write them all down as I was running. Yeah.
There's so much in what you're saying, and I really enjoy that analogy of being able to zoom in and zoom out of perspective, like find what's important and what will help you get through that specific scenario. One thing that I've been really interested in is around the theory of coloring at the moment, and the basis of that is most of what you experience in life doesn't come from the outside world. It's actually your own interpretation of reality. So things happen outside of your control, but it's really up to you what lens you apply to that scenario as to how you choose to overcome it. There's a lot of power in not letting emotion rule your motion, and taking a step back, looking at things subjectively, because I think a lot of the time we're too quick to act in the moment.
And it was Marcus Aurelius, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realise this and you'll find strength. What a GOAT quote that is. Yeah.
Yeah, or wasn't it Shakespeare, there is no good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yeah. Sorry, I got off on a whimsical brainwave of my own internal thoughts then. I get goosebumps quite a lot thinking. Another thing I've found, like relating to like mindset, and it's helped me to kind of name my alter ego that comes in when you hit the wall, i.e. the person who listens to the negative thoughts or the unhelpful thoughts, the one that has that anxiety, that self-consciousness, and worries about all the noise. And I do think it helps to give them a name or give them a very real, tangible label so that you can almost put your arm around him. He's called Stephen for me, so that when I hit the wall, Stephen is chasing me and he's caught me up. It's good to make friends with that person because it's going to come and it's completely normal. Having that tangible kind of label for it that you can kind of qualify helps you to deal with it. It helps me for sure. I'd be like, come on, Steve, come on, Stevie boy, we got this. Like it's fine. Yeah, I think that's a little technique that I use as well. I think everyone should name their negative self.
No, I love that. I've never heard of it before. I think it's a really interesting way of framing it.
That works for me. Might not work for everyone, but it definitely works for me.
One thing that you talk about in your TED talk is, I know it's something that you've used kind of just speaking on this podcast, but what are your thoughts on it, and how do you relate to it, I guess?
I don't know. I think maybe my thoughts have changed a little bit. Maybe I've come full circle. I think in the TED talk, I was like, right, everyone, not that I take issue with the word disability. I absolutely don't. And I've learned to embrace it. Everyone's got something which they cannot do. So does that make us all disabled? Obviously it doesn't. Almost attaching myself to disability, and hopefully we're at the point where we're normalising it to the point where people don't even see disability. I've got mates who have been mates with for years that have disabilities, and yet I forget they're disabled sometimes, because it's just not a thing, is it? It doesn't define someone. It's not their whole character unless you make it. And that's why maybe I'm a little bit of a hypocrite, because a lot of what I do is talking about disability and overcoming disability. I guess that's to help people rather than defining myself as disabled. It's an interesting kind of idea, disability, isn't it? But yeah, no, I think fundamentally I'm quite proud to have a disability now. Absolutely see it as a superpower. So it depends what it means to you. I think it's very individual. Disability for me does not mean that you cannot do something, even though it's used in that wider
context is obviously key, in especially the way that you're using words. But I don't say as well that your relationship is governed partly by your purpose, and that this is about being there for the younger you. It's about encouraging people that have similar conditions or don't have similar conditions to get involved in exercise. The fact that you could barely walk 2 years ago and now you're attempting to break a Crutch Marathon world record in one of the big 4 marathons is an incredible achievement, and I think something that everyone should take inspiration in.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I will humbly accept those words, because that's one thing. It is fact. It's not easy at all times living with a disability, and there are a lot of mental hurdles. So it's good to hear things like that, because it does give me conviction to, again, just push through that pain, push through those tough times, because it is worth it. There is the light at the end of the tunnel, and an old me would not have seen that. Old me would have had a chip on my shoulder and would have almost taken a compliment as a bit of an insult, maybe, because I was uncomfortable with that feeling of not being able to do something. But then, on the other side of the coin, there are certain words and certain slanders that are words for disability that absolutely should not be used, because they are attached to the label of, you can't do something. You are whatever. I'm not going to use any of those words, but yeah, I think that there is a line that can be crossed when it comes to disability. Which is why it's good to raise awareness, right? It's good to educate people and not use certain slanderous words, which very much can be offensive. So, yeah, I'm cool with having a disability and using the word disabled and things. It's become what it is. So, yeah, an interesting discussion.
Yeah, in that same line of thinking, your younger self was to look back on where you are now, looking to break the Crutch World Marathon. You're also potentially looking at Ironman challenges, which are probably the peak of physical endurance challenges that exist. What do you think younger David would make of this?
Well, first of all, he wouldn't have believed you, because I've always dreamt of being able to do things that now seem quite easy. And I do think, again, another quote is a GOAT quote that I love, that I used in the TED Talk, is you don't have to be able to see the top of the staircase to take the first step. You don't have to be able to see the top of that mountain. You just need to start. You just need to go with it and see where that develops. The younger me wouldn't have believed that I could have possibly done that. It would have been very demoralizing, I think, to think, oh, you've got to climb that mountain. You've got to be able to do an Ironman. I was like, well, I can never do that. And it can be quite daunting to think in that way, especially when you are at the bottom of that kind of journey, or you're deemed bottom, where you're lying in a hospital bed and you can't even walk. Like, you got to run a Ironman. You're going to do that one day. Man, you got to chunk these up, these like intermediary goals one by one. It's not a quick process, is it? It's good to reflect, though. it's really good. It does give you some degree of affirmation and strength to carry on, because you've had the strength to endure all of that, and therefore you'll have the strength to go even further.